Hey, what's up guys? Jackson here with Toasty DIY, and today we're doing a little brake job on a 2017 Ram, and this is an Eco Diesel 3-liter. So really great truck. I think I'm at about 70,000 miles, and I believe I'm still rocking the OEM pads. I've actually already done one of the back sides over there. Long story short, we're going to go ahead and just go over the materials you're going to need, the proper and improper ways to do a brake job, because I can't even tell you how many people I see do brake jobs just completely messed up. So first, for materials, we need a jack. So you really need, I would say, at least a 3-ton jack. We're going to zip the tires off with an impact. You don't have to have an impact. You can just use basically anything that uses, I think it's a 22 millimeter socket. And as you can see, fits on there perfectly. And I'm just using Pittsburgh deep well sockets. They're, I mean, you know, not the greatest, but I've never had one crack on me or anything. So they're definitely impact rated. And then we're going to be also needing a ratchet. So this is just like a standard 3/8 swivel head ratchet. And it has a fairly long bar to it because you're going to need a little bit of torque, but not much. These are actually fairly small bolts. I'm not actually sure what the front are. I know the backs though were actually 10 millimeter, just really long bolts that went through on the sliders. So yeah, very small, not a lot of torque needed, and you don't want to over torque those. We'll get to that in a minute. We're also going to need some good brake part lubricant. So you're going to be using this on the sliders. You're also going to use it on the actual pads themselves on the corners to make sure that they can move along the metal sliders easily. You don't really need this, honestly, but this is aluminum anti-seize. If you live up north, I'm in Kentucky, so once again, I don't really need it. You know, when we used to do brakes all the time, we didn't really use it unless it felt necessary. This truck really doesn't have any rust on it. But for these long bolts and stuff that are kind of prone to being able to break because they're very long and skinny, I'm going to be using some on it, not a lot, just a little bit. Socket set. You know, I'm not too sure. Like I said, I know you need a 10 for the back, and that's it. Obviously, if you need to take off the actual whole entire caliper assembly, you're going to need bigger sockets. I would guess like a 17 or 19, but we're not needing to do that. We're just doing pads today. As far as I know, my rotors are within spec, but you know, we'll find that a little bit out more once we get it open. Now for pads, I'm using gold CarQuest pads. I really recommend like OEM, whatever the OEM was, unless there's like an upgraded OEM. You know, a lot of times you have organic, and then they will have upgraded to ceramic over the years. In this case, we had ceramic on the front, but organic in the back was the OEM. I just went with ceramic front and back. There's some advantages to both, but that's just what I decided. But just get good brake pads. There's no reason to get, you know, really crappy like AutoZone ones that are the cheapest, because I mean, if you get a good set and you treat it properly, you're going to get like 60, 70, 80,000 miles out of a set of brake pads. Now another thing that I really like to have, this is a really cheap like Harbor Freight version, but an actual caliper resetter. So a lot of people just use like channel locks, vice grips. The problem is you can really groove up the pistons on your calipers. If you're going to do any type of mechanic work, just buy one of these. I mean, these things are like what, $5, $6. I think it's pretty much all aluminum, super cheap. It's like, why not? They have really nice speed ones too, where you just clamp it and it's like a ratcheting system. I used to love using those, but this one works great, and I've gotten, I don't even know how many brake jobs out of it, and it's an awesome thing to have. And then just a flathead screwdriver to help pry the old pads off, and these little metal guys right here. And then I also like to have, like, you know, a little box of some kind, like a litter box or whatever, just something to catch brake fluid, but brake parts cleaner when we clean stuff off. And that's another thing that isn't really an essential need. I actually have no clue where any of my brake parts cleaner is. I'm just now setting up my new garage, so I'm using carbon choke spray just where I need it. Really, it's just to clean off like brake dust. It's pretty similar to brake part cleaner, but you know, if you can get brake part cleaner, definitely do. And then also I'm using this stuff. So any type of like disc brake quiet, a lot of people don't understand how this stuff's supposed to be used. It's not meant to like put on old pads to, you know, get rid of brake noise. You never ever, so here's our old pads, never ever put anything on the pad surface. It's meant to have friction, so anything that can modify that friction can cause a lot of issues. You can see here a little bit of my pad materials kind of chipped off too, so it's a good thing we're replacing them. Yeah, so you're only supposed to use this stuff on the back of the pads. All right, so we got most of the weight on the stand. We're kind of mixed between the stand and the actual jack now, because like I said, we really don't want to be working under this thing with just the stand under there, because it can do all kinds of things. You know, the hydraulic could fail, it could slide, something could break on it. You just want to have always have a fail safe. So what we're gonna do is there's gonna be these 2 bolts. These ones are definitely bigger than 10 millimeters. These look like they're maybe like 14, which the front's typically, you know, about 80%. I believe it's like 70 or 80 of your braking power. So the front pads and like pretty much everything about the front's always gonna be beefier. So we're gonna go ahead and get our ratchet set up. It is a 13 millimeter. So that was close, not too bad. All right, 13 millimeter. I like to clean up as I go, so I'm gonna go ahead and put this back on here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and break this loose. Now, when it comes to this, by the way, guys, you wanna make sure that once you get this off, you have something to put it on. So I like to kind of, okay, so this is gonna be a little bit of an issue, but not a big issue. So you see this right here, it's spinning. And so I can spin this all day and it's not gonna come loose. So they designed these kind of a weird size where they're really skinny, so you can't really fit a standard wrench over them typically. I probably maybe could in this case. I could always try. You can buy specialty wrenches, but I don't believe this is gonna be super tight. So now you wanna be really careful, guys, when doing any of this brake stuff, not to damage the rubber on these. So, and I'll show you that in just a minute. There we go, all right. See, not too bad. Now, obviously, if you're freaking doing this and you're like just slipping like crazy, you wanna stop and try to get the right size tool, because that just means that your shit's really rusty and we don't wanna strip any of this stuff out. All right, so we got both bolts pretty much hand loose here. So this is gonna be like this is a really standard front. I was kind of worried some of this might be a little bit weird looking, you know, out of the norm, but everything is very, very standard about this. Like 90% of cars that I see front brakes on look just like this. So here's where we're gonna need just a little bit of help. So we got these 2 bolts out. It looks like they still have factory anti-seize on them. So yeah, I think these are the original pads. So I'm just gonna use a little screwdriver here, just nice and gentle. Gonna kind of get the front a little bit off, then we're gonna do the back a little bit. Gonna kind of go back and forth here. Like I said, shouldn't be too bad at all, especially if your car has lower miles. I mean, if you have a 2017, you might not have much more than me, but you have a lot more, I don't know. All right. Almost off, should be able to get it off by hand. There we go. So yeah, a lot of wiggling with pads. So these are actually dual piston, always nice to see. The front's actually single. But dual piston caliper, lots and lots of energy these things can put out, lots of brake power. So you can either buy like really nice little brake hangers where you can hang them from like strut tires like that. But most of the time, if you're just doing the pads and you're not having to take out this whole assembly, you can kind of just set your caliper on top of the rotor. So here is the outboard pad. Now, just a little lesson for anyone who doesn't know, these are your inboard pads. They face inwards to the vehicle, and these are your outboard pads. Typically, inboards wear quicker, and the reason being is because your pistons are pretty much always going to be on the inside, unless you have like, you know, quad piston, or there is some rare instances where you have like pistons on both, but most, like 99% of the time, pistons on the inboard pad. So it pushes on that, and then naturally it kind of pulls the other one in. And as you can see, these guys were thin. I mean, yeah, they were really thin. I definitely heard some squealing, so I'm curious if there's a wear indicator on these, or if they were just really thin and just no more grease was left or anything. Because the back one definitely needed a good amount of grease. So I'm just kind of prying that off. And no, it doesn't actually look like these have a wear indicator on them, which is kind of surprising to me. But every car is different. So yeah, as you can see, they both actually wore pretty evenly, which isn't a bad thing. It almost looks like the outboard was a little bit less wear on it, but yeah, not too bad. So we don't have any major grooves. This is another thing you want to look out for on your brake rotors is, you know, major grooves. If you have like a groove worn into the surface, then you really should replace it, because I mean, if your wear indicator got deep in there, it can cause some pretty major integrity issues with the actual rotor. So now we're gonna go and get out our sliders. So how you're gonna do that is there's basically these little rubber boots back here, and you wanna be really careful with these guys, because if you rip those boots, you have to replace it. Otherwise you're gonna get moisture in there. And as you can see, this looks really good. A lot of times if you have like no grease and like pitting, like rust pitting, you wanna take these out and brush them with like a a wire wheel, preferably brass, so that you don't cause more rust. But you're gonna wipe off that old grease because we're gonna put some new grease on here. Now, so far I have not seen anything that needs to go in one direction. There is a lot of times, guys, where front and rear, sometimes just front, sometimes just rear, require to go on a certain way. And so I'll let you guys know if I see anything like that, but so far, everything has been pretty much symmetrical. I'm gonna have to use this right here. So once again, being very careful with the rubber part. I'm not prying on the rubber, I'm just trying to separate it, trying to basically break that seal so I can get this out. And now if your sliders are just totally stuck, like they're not sliding, that might be a sign that you need to go ahead and replace your whole entire caliper assembly, or at least this part, but normally you gotta buy just the whole thing. But as you can see, mine still full of grease, looking really good, no like massive rust pitting, and they weren't stuck at all, which is nice. So I'm just gonna put my sliders off to the side here, along with the actual bolts to hold the sliders in. And now what I'm going to do, since this is a dual piston, I'm going to take my old brake pad that we're not going to need, so I'm not too worried about messing it up. And I'm just going to pick a side here. And sometimes you have to go back and forth, but we're going to do this. And this is a really good method because this is another rookie mistake. You do not want to push on just one side, because what'll happen is it'll push the other one out. And when I say out, I mean it can come completely out. And at that point, a lot of times you have to completely bleed your brake system. So how this kind of works is you're just going nice and easy. It's going to take some force. I mean, especially if your caliper is old. And if it's seized, it won't go back at all. And if it's seized, a lot of times that also means you either need to rebuild your caliper or just get a new one. I honestly nowadays, like, rebuilding them, unless you got a really big like semi-truck caliper or something, it's just not worth it in my opinion. So I recommend just remanning them. So most auto parts store, when you buy your new one, they'll actually ask for a core, which is basically, hey, give us your old one and we'll give you a little bit of money off. All right, so we're just gonna keep twisting, and eventually it'll bottom out. It'll stop spinning, and also you'll see the piston at the very bottom. And you do need to do this because the new pads, since they have a lot more material on them, are going to be very difficult to get on if you don't do this. And when I say difficult, I mean like impossible. Or you're gonna have to like absolutely destroy the brake pad getting it on there. And so once I get this one side completely down, so if you guys can kind of see, sorry if it's a little hard, I'm almost all the way back in, so I'm going to try to give you guys more of an angle that you can see. And so using this pad helps push both at the same time. Even though we're only on one side right now, the pad's kind of acting as like a flattened tool to help us get both. So I got the one side all the way in. I'm just going to move over here real quick, and it's just a little bit further out. So I'm just going to do that one real quick. It's probably fine the way it is, but I'd rather make sure they're all the way in so I don't have to get out the tool again. All right, so once again, using the pad so that the other one doesn't come back out. And we're pushing in. And like I said, we're not reusing these pads, so we don't need to worry about using the surface. Don't use your new pads like this. That's definitely how you can end up cracking the ceramic or something like that. So now I'm gonna put this back up here. And now normally this is where you take some brake parts cleaner and kind of spray these out a little bit. Like I said, I only have carbon choke cleaner at the moment, so I'm just gonna use a little bit of that. And this just helps get some of like the brake dust and stuff off of there. All right, so now a lot of times, like on certain cars, you're gonna have little pieces of brake hardware still in here. This one actually doesn't have any, which is kind of cool. It's all on the actual brake pad themselves. So what I'm doing off to the side, which you guys probably can't see, so I'm gonna kind of adjust a little bit. I'm opening my new brake pads, and so here's those pieces of hardware I was talking about. And you definitely know you get a cheap brake set if it doesn't come with these, because these are like super cheap, and it's essential to replace these. You do not want to use your old ones. You know, just out with all the old, in with the new, you know, and then we're gonna get another 70,000 miles, no problem, out of these. Maybe more if you're lucky. All right, and move some tools up to the side because I'm gonna actually spray these. So I normally just use like the paper, the box that it comes with, so you don't coat your driveway with this stuff, because it will kind of stain. It's kind of like spray paint, like a really thick spray paint basically. So I'm using CRC disc brake quiet. I don't really have like a preferred brand. We used to really like the Napa stuff, I think it was, but it's pretty much always red. So I'm gonna go ahead. You can give a nice thick coating. You really can't go too thick with this stuff, and you know, too thin is really not an issue either, because it's better than nothing. Like I said, a lot of people don't bother using this stuff anyways, or if they do use it, they don't use it, right? Because they think it literally, like, you put it on the brake pad to make it quiet. Like I can't tell you how many times I see people do that. And you know, eventually it'll rub off, but it's just stupid. All right, so it looks like all of these are the same, which is good, because like I said, you really want to pay attention to this stuff. I'm not always the greatest at that. because sometimes I'll not be paying attention, then you know, put something on backwards. So these are gonna go, should be just like this, facing outwards, and that basically acts like a spring, and we'll kind of see here in a minute why that is. I'm also gonna find out too if it matters. We can compare old brake pads and just make sure, but it looks to me like they're completely symmetrical. So that's always really, I love when car manufacturers do that. I'm not a big fan of like when, you know, like a lot of cars have inboard and outboard pads that are specific. And I just put this one upside down. And a lot of them also just, I don't know, they just do really dumb stuff like that that drives me nuts, because it's really easy to mess up. And I mean like really easy, you gotta really pay attention. So now what we're going to do, and I'll bring the pad at a level height, but like I said, doesn't matter the front from the back. I like getting the backs on a lot, you know, before you put the front on, because a lot of times the front's really easy because you actually see what you're doing. So I'm putting a really liberal amount of brake grease on here. Don't get any on the pads, just a really good coating on the anything that moves. Basically, it's really essential, just like anything else in a car or any type of machinery, right? Anything that moves, you want it to be nice and greased up. So I usually put like the bottom in first, bottom or top, really doesn't matter. All right, will you go in? We'll try the top where I can like really see what I'm doing. Oh, okay, that's what it is, I'm being dumb. So you gotta slide these guys in, and they naturally, the springiness of them kind of pushes them back out. So once again, I'm not, I'm definitely a mechanic. I'm good at doing brakes, but it's not like I have memorized how each pad and everything works. All right. So once again, really good amount of grease here. No need to be stingy with it. And we're gonna slide these in now that we know to do that. Slide to the left. Here we go. All right, we're nice and slid in. Kind of double check everything, make sure it looks good. We don't want any mistakes when it comes to brakes. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the last step. So we already wiped these off. You guys watched me do that. So now we're gonna apply a really good amount of grease to these. And now they do actually have, like, if you want to go really all out, and this is actually really nice for the rear because I don't have that specific tool. I could make one if I wanted to, but basically, like, you can get a syringe, or they make special like grease injection tools where you can actually kind of push grease in the inside of these rubber boots. I don't have that, and this is how we always did it. It's basically just kind of twist it in there now. So twist, and then boom, you'll hear it reseal. You hear a really nice, like, kind of air pushing out sound too, because you know, you're just filling that cylinder with grease. It helps last a lot longer. Like I said, you know, get yourself a good grease for this. A lot of times pads will come with grease. It's not bad too, but we always use this stuff. All right, there we go. So you'll know if these are good because look at this. Pushes in and springy, pushes right back out, doesn't get caught up or anything. So now we're gonna take this right here, our caliper, and nice and gentle, because we don't want to scrape the crap out of the stuff we just put on there. You kind of have to push in the sliders typically. So what I'm doing with my hands is I'm pushing in the sliders while I'm attempting to get this. There we go. All right, so now I'm kind of holding it with one hand. Actually, it looks like it's gonna stay on, so that's good. Now here's where you kind of have the choice to use anti-seize. This was actually not anti-seize. They actually used a Loctite to make sure these didn't come undone. So I'm not gonna use anti-seize in the front. They're also really short bolts, so you shouldn't have to worry about these guys breaking. The rears, though, will be a little bit of a different story, and I'll kind of show you what I mean. I didn't notice any Loctite from the factory, and they're very long bolts that are kind of prone to rust because they're long, and they're also would be prone to snapping if they get any rust or corrosion. So those I did use anti-seize on, but these ones don't really give me the anti-seize need. So now that I got them started, we're going to gently, kind of just gently hand tighten them, because we don't want to accidentally cross fit or something, and we don't want to tighten just the top one like really tight and then not do the bottom one. So we're just getting them like hand tight. We're gonna have to use our little like wrench or Nipix or whatever tool you used again as well to get these like all the way cranked down. You know, do this completely proper. So how I usually like to tighten is, I like, you know, a good long ratchet, and obviously the bigger the bolt, the tighter you probably want it. You can look up torque specs too. I'm not going to on this truck. I trust myself. So once I get it to like a really good hand tight, I'm gonna kind of give it some really good smacks, and you'll hear some torque sounds happening. And then, you know, one more time to see if it needs any more. And no, I mean, it's definitely using all my strength pretty much. Now the rears are going to be different. The rears, once again, very, very long bolt. You do not want to put all your might into it. I'll kind of show you how I'm going to tighten the rears. So once again, all hand tight here. Now, once again, if you live up north, you can always put some anti-seize on your lugs, but you really want to make sure that you torque these things down to spec. All right. Sometimes you got to give a little kick to get the rim kind of broken away there. This is a good spot right there, right? All right. Already did the other side. So 10mm socket. All right. Yeah, and like I said, these guys are definitely a lot more fragile than the other side. Yeah, and I've always, you guys have probably noticed in a lot of the videos, whenever I break stuff loose, I often kind of use the smack method, and that's something I kind of, I don't know, I personally like doing, because you'll notice a lot of times people use, you know, what's called impact force or hammer force to break things loose, and that's because it helps kind of get corrosion and stuff broken loose before you just twist it, because you don't want to do on things that are corroded, you don't just want to twist and force, because that's how you shear things. So a lot of times, you know, use an impact and it basically ding, 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 ding. It kind of hammers it loose and knocks everything off. You have a much better chance of getting things off with an impact than you, and not breaking than with just your hand. So here's these guys. Like I said, they're pretty long. They're like, I think they're M8 by, it looks like 125s, but they're, with these calipers, I believe, yeah, the bottom actually has a lip right here, so you have to start from the top. And I think the other side might be the opposite. I don't know why. I feel like I remember the other side being the opposite of what I'm doing now. So yeah, long story short, one of the sides has like a lip, so you have to kind of start like this. These ones are definitely they're gonna be a little bit harder to get off. So I'm just kind of wiggling my way back and forth, and be careful when you do this, guys, because I'm trying not to do this and then let go of the caliper, because if this gets too much weight on it, it can snap the hose, and then you're doing a lot more than a brake caliper at that point. You're gonna have to replace the hose, and you're gonna have to bleed probably the whole entire brake system, and nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to go from a simple brake job to that. I've had it happen, you know, once or twice, so I'm speaking from experience here. Once again, wiggle back and forth, guys. Whew. And we're off. So it's, like I said, single piston, but still stupid heavy duty. That's just kind of how these big trucks are. Ooh, and I almost screwed up there. Be very careful. This is your ABS sensor right here, and yeah, that would really suck if we broke that, because then we'd have to replace that sensor, and yeah, once again, a lot more work than we wanted to do. All right, so now that we talked about all the things we can break, let's go ahead and get all of our stuff out of this box, because this is supposed to be only trash and like brake fluid, but I decided to use it to carry my tools around too. All right, making sure we just have trash in here before we spray stuff. So once again, I'm just gonna go ahead and kind of tilt it downwards, get some of this stuff out of here. And also, if you get a bunch of grease on the surface of the rotor, you definitely want to spray that off. So these ones definitely look like they might be in a little bit worse shape than the other side. Let's see what we got here. Sorry if I just realized my earbud might have been like flapping into the camera. All right, so these ones you can kind of pull off from either side, and okay, it's not terrible. It looks like we just had some of the glue or something like that maybe got hot and was kind of seeping out, but definitely thin. Not terrible, but yeah, definitely getting there. We have some chips on the edges and stuff, so maybe we would have seen some cracking on these soon. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the other side off. But so far, I haven't seen any like straight metal on metal action, which is good. You know, that's you want to replace your pads before that happens ideally, but a lot of people don't. So once again, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna lay out our pads. I'll put them over here this time. So we're gonna spray them real quick. I got a fan blowing on me now. Man, it feels so freaking good, but it's gonna be a little bit difficult to spray. I'm gonna try to just put my hand in front of it so that all my spray doesn't like go everywhere. Okay, it keeps them from getting in my face now though. This stuff's definitely not great for your health too, so I recommend wearing, you know, a mask and stuff. I also recommend wearing gloves to doing brake jobs too, because that brake dust is not really good for your skin or good to breathe in or anything. Brake dust is like awful for you to breathe in. Maybe worse than some of the other chemicals, you know. So now what we're gonna do is these have the actual brake hardware built on. So you just kind of take a flat head and just scrape that off. No big deal. But definitely got some rust in there. And the top one's already coming off on its own. So thank you, top one. Now these ones are, okay, well, that's all the way down there now. So worry about that later. I am gonna actually spray this off a little bit because that definitely had some rust and stuff on there, and this stuff does not inhibit rust by any means. If anything, it actually dries everything out and kind of brings rust out, but it'll get loose particles off. So we're not going to put any grease directly on these, or at least not yet. We might, but we're not going to put any directly on. I'm just going to take these, kind of get them towards the edge, and then just push them on. And then I usually like to take like a flathead or my ratchet, kind of reverse, and just tap it, because it gets really annoying if one of these is like just slightly not seated right. It'll end up not wanting to, when you go to put the pad on, they have to be perfect. If they're not on all the way, the pad will be really difficult and just not go on. So now, the slider hardware on these are a little bit different, a little bit awkward in my opinion. Oh, this is nice. It's like a little, kind of catches it for me so I can show you guys. So these ones, the slider is weird because it goes both ways, which I actually haven't seen one of these before. But like I said, you know, you always see weird stuff, especially in the rear of cars were always weird to me because, I don't know, they always change so much, I feel like. So first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and reset this before I go through and grease and everything. The reason I'm going to do this first is because the last thing I'd want is to go grease everything and do all that work and then realize that the piston's seized up. This is one thing we did if we ever worked on a car and we thought they might need a new caliper, like if it looked kind of bad, you know, it was an older car, they hadn't ever been replaced, and you know, had like 190,000 miles on it. You know, there's a good chance that they were rusted pretty much shut. But once again, I'm using a caliper or a brake pad. You don't have to do this. I'm just doing it so I don't have to like push the push this guy like all the way back. Basically just be a lot more twisting, and I don't want to do all that. Now this one is definitely a little bit more difficult to get in, but it's going in. Difficult's not necessarily a bad thing, but it definitely could mean that, you know, you're getting a little bit of moisture in there. So it could also mean that, you know, maybe it's time for a brake fluid flush sometime soon, but I don't think that's the case here. But, you know, hey, we'll find out later. We're just doing pads today. If we break something else later, then, you know, that comes later. All right, here we go. Now they're going in nice and easy, so it might have just had a little bit of pitting on the inside it wanted to get past. Another fun tip to you guys is brake fluid doesn't really evaporate. So whenever your brake fluid gets low, it doesn't mean that you need to top off your brake fluid. It means that your pistons are probably all extended a lot further out than they were when you first got the car, because, well, I mean, right now, the brake fluid's gonna be probably at the top of the cylinder, I would guess. But then, you know, in a few years, with another 70,000 miles, the brake fluid's gonna go down because it's, you know, it's inside these pistons here. So, a little fun fact for you, you're not like necessarily leaking or anything like that, it's just kind of part of what happens. So, brake fluid top-offs are kind of iffy, like if you need one, you know, that you could have a leak or you might just need to replace your pads. So, we're gonna grease these first because this part was a little bit difficult on the other side. And like I said, I'm not super familiar with these, so what I ended up doing is I'm going to take this flathead, and once again, be very careful because we don't want to end up putting a hole inside this rubber here, because then we're going to have to replace it. So what I'm trying to do is get the flathead kind of like just inside here gently, and now I'm going to push out, and that'll unseat the top part. So it's almost like a double-sided slider. It's really weird. So as you can see, I'm pushing it out, and now, there we go. That wasn't too bad. And yeah, these ones definitely, look how there's just no grease. I mean, like no grease at all. There's some dust even just came out. So I'm gonna leave it kind of like this, because I found if I got it all the way out, it just made things kind of difficult. And what I'm gonna do, and this is where having something to inject grease would be really nice. And I'm just gonna take this. It's gonna get really messy, by the way, guys. And I'm just gonna force that in there and try to get a few gobs of grease. A few gobs of grease, and I'm gonna feel really good about this side. Oh yeah, there we go. And now I'm gonna take a little bit of this, not a lot, because I mean, this is a very tight seal, so naturally, almost everything I put on there, especially if I put big gobs on here, it's just gonna come out. So now I'm gonna slowly push back in, give it a little bit of twisting, a little bit of twist in action. And look at that, it's definitely going in a lot easier than it came out. And so I'm gonna cover this end and try to, all right, we got one side sealed. See if I can get the other side sealed, and there we go. Both sides sealed. I definitely am pretty confident I got some grease in there, and yeah, we're sliding now for sure. A lot easier than before. Still not amazing, but it's better. Once again, if you had a tool to insert some grease in there, I definitely would highly recommend that. And oh, there it is. It flew away. So also having a cloth, guys, is amazing, especially when you're wearing gloves, because this can get really slippery really quick. And I'm not too worried, by the way, about any grease being on the outside. If anything, that'll just help with rust, as long as we don't get it on the actual pad surface. So once again, I'm gonna push this side out a little bit. This side's definitely moving a little bit easier. Oh yeah, I was actually able to, look at that, got that off without even trying, except that wasn't the way I was trying to do it. All right, so once again, I'm gonna get this under here, push down. We are unseated. And now just kind of push and boom. This side's out as well. Definitely, come on. Definitely fighting me a little bit, so I'm gonna take this and kind of push it through. Gonna get it all the way to the end. Like I said, if it comes unseated, it's not the end of the world. It's just a little bit hard to get back in. I guess in theory you could unseat it and you could take this and go all the way through with it, but I don't know. So I'm just gonna kind of spin around in here. I'm actually do one more on this one. I feel like I could have had a little more grease on there. Tuck this in. All right, and now, once again, just a light coating on this one, not like we did the fronts, because the fronts, very confident that all that goes in there, but with this one, it's just such a tight fit that I don't think we're getting a whole lot. I'm covering the end once again so that all of our grease doesn't just instantly come out the other side. All right, let's give it a little bit of twisting action. There we go. And we're reseated on the back, and now we're reseated on the front. And yeah, feels like we got a lot of grease in that one for sure. She slides back and forth real nice. And you're gonna wanna go ahead and kind of push these to like about here, because once again, when you go to put the these back on, they're gonna kind of fight you if you don't. All right, so now it should be good to go ahead and get our new, we got our new hardware on. We got our piston pushed all the way back in. We got these greased up, and we got our pads also, the back of them painted with some anti-brake noise. So I'm gonna take this and just, once again, a real nice amount, a little bit on the inside too, so that we got all that nice and covered. These ones are a little bit weird to get on too. Kind of like, you know, I struggle with the front a little bit too, which, like I said, is very common. I mean, I don't have these cars like memorized. I don't know if I feel like I've probably done one of these at some point, but I can't remember. So with this one, it's kind of weird, especially the inboard, because it's so hard to see. So I can't really describe it very well. I'll show you guys with the front though, because you kind of have to get it like, I don't know, you got to watch like 20 different things at once while you do this pretty much. It wasn't incredibly easy, I found. Go figure. Working on a car, not easy. All right, I'm trying to do this without, so you also want to be careful not to bend your hardware. So here, I'm going to do the inside first, or the outside first actually, because I think that'll help hold it in place. So now for the top, spread it just a little bit more. There we go. Now you can tell if it's in is the pad material should be flat against the rotor. If it's not, then you're not all the way in. That looks nice and good. Happy with that. So now let's try the other side again. And you can always, if you feel like you rubbed off a lot of your grease, you can always put some more on there. I mean, really, too much grease typically isn't gonna hurt. Would you look at that? It actually worked. All right, we got the bottom on and over. There we go. All right, so now that should hopefully stay on. Stay, don't fall. We're gonna take some of our aluminum anti-seize, and you can see we don't really have too much rust, not at all. It's not bad, but I'm just gonna do a little bit on each side. That'll just help ensure that these don't snap off. So we're gonna go ahead, and like I said, these have kind of springs on them with that hardware, so you're gonna have to find the right spot when you screw this on. It's not gonna wanna just, you know, fall into place. You kind of have to push somewhere on the caliper while you tighten. See, just like this one's not wanting to go in, so. And I'm just gonna go ahead and tighten these. You don't have to use like Nippics or a pair of channel locks, or sorry, not channel locks, but a wrench for this side. These ones screw straight in. Nothing to spin here. Everything looks good, so now what we're gonna get our tire back on, and then we're gonna lower the car, so all stands and everything out from under it. We're gonna torque all the tires down, and we're gonna take it for a test drive, and this probably applies to many other trucks. So hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out Toasty Bros and also Toasty Clips, and we'll see you guys in the next one.